go live, sorry. Okay, good morning everybody, and apologies for the late start of the meeting today. Various issues that hopefully internet will keep with us and all sorts of other things. So welcome everybody. My name's Cathy Guthrie and I'm the chairman today. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and in the communal areas. Please ensure that you wear a face covering at all times unless you're sitting down, or if you are exempt from doing so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. We will be using the e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. So members, can you make sure you're logged in and ready to vote? Fire safety arrangements. If you hear the alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit. Make your way to the assembly point, which is the Ipswich Town football ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium ground floor area walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs and not the lifts, and we do have a problem with the stairs, so members will direct to the back stairs if we do have to evacuate. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. The council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. So the introductions today, the area planning manager is Gemma Walker. Good morning, Gemma. Our legal advisor, Christine Flitner. Thank you very much. Good morning, Christine. Case officers, Mark Russell, morning, and Alex Bredman, and Vincent. He'll come and join us later because he's got other things on his mind there. Governance officer, Alicia Norman. Welcome to you. We also have Mandy, who's driving our internet today. So I think that's everybody. And then the good people of you who are sitting at the back there, you've got 3 minutes to speak when you're invited to do so. And there are other members of the public at the back there too. So we also have ward members of Councillor Mellon, who's on the committee, but we all know what happens when you become a ward member. As you choose. I think we're quite happy for you to stay where you are. So, apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Norris and Councillor Gould. Substituting today, we have Councillor Matheson and Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary and non-interest by members, non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare? None to declare. Declarations of lobbying? None. Declarations of personal site visits? No. Now then, you've got to cast your minds back. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting. Councillor Stringer, I do beg your pardon, sorry, I was ahead of myself.
I want to declare an interest in item C. My house is 60 metres to the north of the site.
Thank you, Councillor.
I won't be voting on that item, but I will take place in the debate. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. No vote. Thank you. Councillor Stringer. Thank you very much. Right, where are we? So, yes, we've got to cast our minds back to the minutes on the 24th of November. I'm sure you've all read them and had a look at them. Are there any points of accuracy, please? No. So can I have a proposer? Councillor Caston, followed by Councillor... Dave, I've forgotten your name. Muller, sorry. I tell you, this is not a good day. So on that basis, may we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now open.
Hang on, I've only got... where's the... I am happy to agree those, it's just I haven't got the item up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So that means that 6 votes for and 2 abstentions, so that's carried.
Receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So the schedule of applications to be heard today will go in the order that they sit on the papers. And so I'll now invite the case officer, Mark Russell, to introduce the first case, please. That's DC 20-444. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. I shall begin the presentation now with luck. Some of the members here may recall that this application was before the Referrals Committee back in 2019 when it received listed building consent. It was tied to a planning application for the development of the former Mid-Suffolk HQ site in Needham Market. The first slide you see shows you the 2 parcels of land, and there's a larger blowout so you can see where it is in relation to the built form of Needham Market. We're concentrating on the parcel which is labelled Zone 2, and that contains the old HQ and the range of buildings which were joined to it. Particularly, we're really looking at what's shaded in red there, which is the listed building itself. So that's a historic Hursley House, which is the northernmost of the buildings, and then the later addition just to the south of it. Much of what you're about to look at has already got consent. The workforce is on site constructing new dwellings. This relates to the listed building itself, and really we're just looking at fairly minor tweaks to the scheme which was approved back in 2019. Just to remind you of the constraints of the site, it's shaded in the usual colour. The conservation area is over to the east, and there are many listed buildings on the attractive high street of Needham Market. I'm going to show you these 2 slides, then skip through the next few because I've got some better versions of them, but these are the ones that you were given in your bundle. So that's the existing elevations, and to note, on the proposed, to the left of the main Hursley House building is the roof terrace, or roof flat, should I say, and then to the right is a new 2-storey extension. So if I take you through these, which are on your pack, but don't help with this presentation. Right, so this was the scheme that got consent in 2019. I'm going to show you the 2019, 2022, and then what the changes are. So 2019 was this, 2022 is this, there's slightly different notation. But if I just take you to this, basically, you can see that the red shows what fabric is tabled to be removed, and that's largely modern partition walls, and mostly in the modern, the more recent addition to Hursley House. So the notable changes at ground floor level are, if you see over on the left, that the pink thick wall there, that's actually, it's not just a wall, it's showing you how much bigger the extension is tabled to be. So it's about a metre or so, a couple of metres wider and longer. It's the same extension that you just saw, but it's just a little bit bigger. And there's some other small changes inside as well. So I've numbered them for you. They're very cosmetic. They're just changing positions of doors. You can see with points 2 and 3 there, that was to be a through door. That's now to be a door to a cupboard, for example. So they're minor changes like that. And looking at further changes, you can see that the bathroom is to be made larger than it was going to be, so the walls are slightly pushed back. And that also helps to better expose historic features like the cornice and the old coving, which the historic buildings officer was keen to try and preserve the appearance of. And there's changes to circulation space. If you can see between 2019 and 2022, there's some minor changes there. So going to the first floor, a little bit of fabric removal there, same as with the ground floor, but not a huge amount. They're just, you can see they're small rooms, small partitions. The first floor changes replicate those at the ground floor, obviously, with the extension to the left, and then I've circled several other minor changes, and these really relate to configuration or reconfiguration of the usable rooms. You can see the kitchen's been reconfigured, 3 bedders have been brought down to 2 bedders, and reworking of the circulation space, and so on. On the second floor, again, there's fabric removal, just really minor points, basically. So, again, on the second floor, you have minor elements which are being changed like this. So, repositioning of the kitchenette, the ensuite's repositioned, new corridor, bathroom, kitchenette, and other bathroom are all reconfigured and repositioned, just to make the space work better. This has almost no effect on the historic fabric relating to the previous consent. And finally, we're up in the roof now. You can see those skylights. Those are tabled not to be there now. See, fabric removal is virtually none. And that is now to be basically as a void space to better respect the layout of the old building. So to remind ourselves of the building we're talking about, here is Hursley House. And that is an artist's impression of what the extended section would look like. And this is from the old application, but it's exactly the same. Nothing's changed. And again, just to remind ourselves of what we're talking about, these are the buildings which should be removed. And the features that I mentioned, such as these, are the ones which are now going to have their full glory better exposed for enjoyment of people using the building. And the other issue that's come up is the doors. These are to be kept in situ, but blocked in such a way as to be fire and sound resistant, but to be able to be recovered for use at some later date if necessary. And that, members, is it. It's a series of small changes which basically revisit the listed building consent which was granted in 2019.
Thank you very much indeed. Do members have any questions for Mark? Councillor Warboys.
Thank you. Curious, really, there's no discussion in the documents from our heritage officers concerning the harm to, or potential harm to a listed building. I've looked through and there's something from Place Services, but the only comments I can find are from Historic England, but nothing from our own heritage people.
Yeah, I mean, the issues that arose were, I think that the key issue that came up was the issue of doors, etc., did come up, and also the roof terrace came up again, but that's already got consent. The discussions were had with the Place Services historic buildings officers on site and also with the applicant, and we had a meeting there. It was about a month ago actually, and he's happy with what's been proposed and has said so in his response, which hopefully is in your table papers.
Could you just direct us to that if it's in the table papers, please? Hang on a minute, Councillor Stringer, just one moment. Can we find them? Can Gemma find them in our table papers? I mean, it's a very good point, Councillor, but if we can accept what's been said, but it should be in our table papers, a very good point, so we'll find out.
I've got the summary on page 28, but perhaps, Mark, is it the full version in the...
Sorry, did I say table papers? I meant bundle. In the bundle, you should have the historic building officer's response.
Which page?
Where's the bundle? Bundle. I don't know what document I'm looking at. I can.
think that was the point that Councillor was making, that we have a comment from Historic England and we have a comment from Place Services, isn't it, Councillor? Isn't that
Place
what we-
Services is the consultant for this because it's our application.
Ah,
Sorry if that
does
wasn't clear.
that clears it up for both of us
Yeah.
then, doesn't it?
Initially, our own heritage officer had commented, but that was an admin mistake. They shouldn't have done because it's our. So Place Services is, for this purpose, our historic building officer. Sorry.
Because this Place Services only relates to the internal alterations. Am I to assume that with regard to the removal of the mansard roof and the roof terrace, that's not part of this application?
It is technically part of this application, but it's already got consent. So if members were to deny these internal changes, the applicant could just do them anyway. It was looked at last time and it was weighed up against the public benefit and we found in its favour. So that has consent and it has planning permission. So really we asked our historic buildings officer, Place Services, to talk to the applicant about the internal configurations and the treatment of the internal fabric. That's the crux of today's application, really.
Thank you, that's...
Yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Stringer?
Yep, thank you, Chair. In the past, I have had the pleasure of going through some of those doors that are mentioned in the application, and they're very, very fine quality doors. I was a little unclear about what's going to happen to them. And is there any chance we can get a bit of clarity in what's actually going to happen to the doors?
We have the applicant here who can, or the agent rather, who can give some more information in a moment. But the fundamentals of it are that the doors will be looked after in place, but will be covered over to make them compliant with building regulations. So it would be a hidden away door, but visible from one side, not from the other.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Thank you. No. Well, we have the agent who is here, Mr. Anthony Polanski, and he is present today, but he doesn't wish to make a representation, but may answer any questions. So do members have any questions at all? No, I think we've sort of cleared it with what we heard. Councillor Stringer, yes?
Just about the doors, I take it they'll be visible from the public access or the private building?
Yes, that's correct. So on the lobby side, and the idea is that because they're separating residential rooms, we need to improve the acoustic separation, so they'll be insulated on the flat side.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Thank you very much indeed. So.
Thank you, Chair. So, whilst I accept the principle of a residential conversion, I support Needham Market Town Council's comments on page 26 of the papers, particularly with regard to the proposed roof extension to the more modern southern extension, which I believe will be out of keeping with the existing street scene and the adjacent listed buildings in a conservation area. The Ancient Monument Society expresses much the same reservations within their consultee response on page 27. However, I note that the planning officer states that this is not proposed to be changed with this current application, which is unfortunate. Regards, Councillor Mike Norris.
Thank you very much. And if anybody wants to comment on that, we'll do during the debate. So thank you very much. And in fact, we now open up the matter for debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Matheson, thank you.
Yeah, just a procedural point, really. I think with the other applications on this wider site, I have just noted the fact that I do live in Needham Market. I do not represent Needham Market on the council, and I cannot see the site from my home. Okay?
That's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor. One thing that Councillor Stringer mentioned, and I must admit I had a smile to my face when I saw the doors at Needham Market, and remember whizzing through them on many an occasion. And so I'm pleased that a lot of it's going to be preserved under that basis. I just do have an interesting comment. Well, I think it is. The void space, and I do apologise to everyone, I'm out of order. The void space, will it be used for anything at all?
My understanding is not, but if you want to speak to the agent about that and ask him that question, I think it's just in terms of being more sympathetic to the building. I don't think it's to be used for anything.
Can I just ask you, is it going to be used for anything at all?
I'm sorry, when you say the void space, specifically...
That was on the roof space, wasn't it?
Where the, I think I had it on as B. Can we show the slide again? Where the skylights would have been on that flank. On the roof.
Is it the right one? I'm on. Yeah, what we've done is we've opened, I think originally there was going to be a level roof on there, so we've opened it up so it's effectively a double height living room space. So we've just so the space will remain as it was. So that's what we've done. Well, as you go up, you've got bedrooms on either side on the upper level, but it's open to the living room. That's all right.
Yeah, more than happy with this particular application and the recommendations made in the conditions on page 32. And I would actually move approval on this one, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Carston, looking for a seconder here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a sympathetic plan. I think it's an improvement in the layout in there. More useful apartments. Yeah, I've no issues with this. I think this has been done very well. So I'd like to second Councillor Muller, please.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak to the recommendation there? Anybody else wish to speak at all into the debate? Well, in that case then, I thank very much everybody's input. And would you like to go to the vote for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now open. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for and 1 abstention, so that is carried.
Thank you very much. And in view of the late start, if we can keep going on to the next item, please. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. So we move on. Alex, thank you very much. When you're ready, if you'd like to present the case, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I have DC 22-00357 today to present. This is a householder application for the erection of a single-storey front and rear extension. Just for clarity, this application is, well, the applicant is a colleague at the council, hence I need to present this to you. So here we have the red line plan. I've just presented this before the aerial viewings just to make the next slides a little bit easier to read, basically, but the applicant has provided the blue line around the residential curtilage with the red line around essentially where the proposal is going to extend. Again, we can see the aerial map, an existing residential area. And again, in terms of constraints on site, we essentially don't have any. There are no major constraints on site, and the site is within the settlement boundary for Stowupland. Here we have the existing elevations. Draw your attention mostly to this existing side extension and the front porch. As you see, when we move to the proposed plans, we're essentially just extending forwards beyond this. At the front of the house, we're going to be wrapping around and creating a new porch. It only extends about 0.6 meters forward of the existing porch. We're going to have a slight raising of the roof, and again, extending around to the rear. There's no wraparound at the rear of the house, though. And again, just the floor plans. You can see the wraparound at the front, and again, modest extensions on either side, really. Just some site photos now. See the existing house and the neighbour. We do have this small wall that extends a little bit further along to the boundary. That's going to stay in place with the gate, so there's still rear access to the rear of the house, sorry. And then just from another angle, just so we can see essentially the driveway, so we can see that that's not going to be affected too much as a result of the proposal, and we're still going to have enough room for another vehicle on the site. And that is it. The officer recommendation is for approval, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions for the officer? No. We don't have anyone other than a statement from Councillor Eborn. I've got one here, I think, unless you haven't got it. You've got them both now. Okay, I was picking it up. Two statements, one from both ward members. Rachel, if you'd like to read it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a ward member statement from Councillor Eborn. She says, application DC/22/00357 is supported by the Parish Council, and while it is a set of single-storey extensions somewhat different to neighbouring properties, as it is only at committee due to being the relation of a council employee, I have no additional comments to make. Kind regards, Councillor Eborn. Would you like me to do Councillor Wellham's statement as well? Okay. So this statement is from Councillor Wellham, who is also the ward member. He says, my only comment on the detail is to ask committee to note that the extension into the front garden will be in front of the building line and to consider whether or not that this is appropriate. Regards.
Thank you very much indeed. So we need to open the matter up for debate because we haven't got anyone else to speak. So who would like to speak first? Councillor Byrne, I saw, and then Councillor Matheson. Thank you.
Sorry, yes, I was just going to ask the officer if she'd kindly repeat the last sentence of Councillor Mellon's submission.
Of course, yeah.
Councillor, I think it's
Councillor Wellham's.
Wellham. We've got so many muddled names.
So his ward member statement is essentially only just one sentence, so I'll read it out completely again. He says, my only comment on the detail is to ask committee to note that the extension into the front garden will be in front of the building line and to consider whether or not that this is appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson. Now into debate, so Councillor, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask if planning officers were concerned or happy regarding the point that Councillor Weller makes about the building line.
Yeah, personally, like I said, there is an existing porch. We're only extending it 0.6 beyond that as it is. I don't think it's a significant increase beyond the front building line. Like I said, I think the extension overall is fairly modest.
Can you just clarify the distance for permitted development rights, or the size for when you have a PD?
So you can't come beyond the front elevation under permitted development, so that wouldn't be allowed. And in terms of off the side, you're looking at half the width of the original dwelling. So potentially as a side extension, it might be permitted development. I don't know if it's got its rights intact or not, but in theory that would be a possibility. So the projection itself beyond the front, we wouldn't usually be able to consider under permitted development.
That's interesting. Okay. Please.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with this at all. I think this is an improvement on a house. It looks good. A dining room, a downstairs shower room is always a good addition to a house. It's sensible and it's nothing. There's nothing outrageous about it. So I'd like to propose that we grant planning permission with conditions on this, please.
Councillor Muller?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm more than happy to second Councillor Caston's recommendation to grant planning permission with the conditions as stated in the papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, I just wanted to second it as well.
Ah, sorry. Councillor Byrne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with I would agree with the proposer and seconder. I think this is an improvement of the front elevation, its appearance, and I think it adds to the interest of the street scene. So, notwithstanding, I mean, yes, there are benefits internally as well, but I think that's an important benefit externally too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak? No? Well, I have a proposal and a seconder, so may we go to the vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now open on your modern.gov app. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for, so that is unanimous.
Much everybody. And if we can just have a very quick 10-minute break before the next item, if that would be satisfactory to everyone. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed, and we're now back to the next and last item on the agenda. Land on the west side, Broad Road, Bacton, Suffolk, DC 2104779, and we'll ask Vincent Pearce, the case officer, to present the case, if you would. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen and guests. This is a reserved matters application for 65 dwellings based on an outline planning application that was granted at the end of 2020. As we say, in Bacton. Just to remind members, the outline planning permission is accompanied by a Section 106 agreement that delivers 35% affordable housing, open space and play, primary school contributions and secondary school transport contributions. Clearly that's not a matter for you today, but I thought it helps to remind ourselves of what went before and what mitigation there is for the community. I also want to go into a little bit of detail about condition 12 that was attached to the outline planning permission, because included in the permission is a requirement to implement highway improvements from the site southwards along Broad Road into Plough Hill and under the railway bridge. That includes the provision for the first time ever of a footpath where there isn't one at the moment, and there have been some concerns expressed about the nature of those works. But the principle of those works has been agreed, and to secure their delivery we've used a mechanism that members may recall that we used in Stowupland, and we call it our triple lock system. It's a Grampian condition, so that the engineering drawings of those works have to be agreed with ourselves and the local highway authority prior to any work starting on site. And my colleagues at Suffolk County Council are dealing with the Section 278 order as we speak. That condition also requires all the approved detail to be implemented in accordance with a timetable to be agreed. And last of all, there can be no occupation of any of the dwellings on this development site until those improvement works have been implemented. So what I'm saying to members this morning is that is not a matter before you. We are purely looking at the reserved matters. And as always, my presentation is merely here to illustrate and supplement the report that you've all received. Unusually, I don't usually describe a developer to you because that isn't a material consideration, but I think it's worth just pointing out that keep moat homes are not particularly familiar to us in this part of the world, but they are in the top 10 in the UK for the delivery of numbers of houses. So they are a big company. They have an ethical standpoint and way of operating. We have previously approved a keep moat scheme in Old Newton, not a million miles away from this site. Just to familiarise ourselves, Bacton to the north of Stowmarket and to the east of Elmswell, approached by the B1113. More localised context, Bacton itself is surrounded by a range of villages and hamlets. The flashing dot is the application site, and you'll see that it sits to the east of the railway line. Here's the application site. You'll notice that the majority of what we might call built up Bacton there is highlighted in the dusky orange colour. Recently, committees, your sister committee and yourselves have looked at an application in this point, and that's been approved for 85 dwellings. On this one, people cross the railway to get to the sports facilities on the other side of the railway. We have another 51 homes in this position, very few constraints on this site. There is a public footpath to the south, but it doesn't adjoin this particular site, so it is unconstrained. Just to, again, familiarise yourself, on the left is the outline planning permission, and on the right is the current layout that we're discussing this morning. And on the slide on the left, in the black dashed line, I've shown where the edge of development is, and also on that slide I've shown where the existing ditch is that runs across the site in blue. You'll notice that the outline illustrative layout didn't necessarily relate particularly well to the existing ditch. What we've done in discussion with Keep Moat is to pull the houses further away from the railway, which I think is good for amenity reasons, but we've also been able to increase the amount of open space within the development. So the area in green is where we've clawed back additional open space. Here's the site again, and we'll just quickly superimpose the layout. The green arrow is the access point, broadly midway on the frontage, taken directly off Broad Road. Some shots of the site, so we're looking southward, open field, trees all around the edge, no hedgerow in this position. You can start to see hedgerow as we look further north. Again, the trees in the distance on the edge of the site. And to the north of the site, an established hedge. The additional open space has helped to soften the edge of this development. As I've shown there, obviously we have gardens, all of a reasonable size, but also superimposed into this new landscape are a series of SUDS features, which includes actually SUDS alongside the highway. That's something that you have been asking us to try and secure, and we've been pushing developers for a long time to actually embrace the idea of building in swales into the development. And fortunately, Keep Moat have accepted that challenge and run with it, and we're very pleased with their approach to SUDS. Access to the site, principally you come in where the blue arrow is. The main estate access is the blue. The flashing turquoise colour is the raised table, and then there are a series of residential streets that run off of it. A good mix of forms across the site, so we have examples of terraces, semi-detached units, detached units, and through a series of amendments we have secured bungalows in this position. The outline application permission required 2 bungalows. We have the 2 bungalows. It also required 2 maisonettes, well, 1 maisonette being 2 flats. That's in this position. So the range of forms is good, something Keep Moat have worked with us to achieve. We do have the 22 affordable units, and they are now, following a series of amendments in the sizes that were required by our strategic housing team as specified in the Section 106 agreement. So we have a cluster in this position. The majority are affordable rented, I think in the proportion of 70-30, which is again what our strategic housing colleagues required. And then we have another cluster at this point. Good elevations, good detailing, so we have examples of exposed rafter feet, decorative banding, flat brick arches, door hoods, bay windows, and the example on the right is a corner turning unit, and I know that members are keen to ensure that where we have buildings that sit on the corner, we don't have flank end walls, that we actually have visual interest that also allows surveillance out of any adjoining open space. So we have secured that, and again, Keep Moat have cooperated with us. An example here where we see there's a single toilet window there. We could, with a bit of adjustment, and I haven't discussed this with Keep Moat, simply turn that into 2, and the proportions of that gable are, I would argue, enhanced, but that's something we can deal with under the recommendation. Were you minded to agree the recommendation and grant and approve reserved matters? Next slide, again, You'll notice on the far right another interesting side wall that looks out over open space. Again, it's not a blank brick wall, but there's a lot of visual interest and good surveillance out. This is the masonette unit, and so on the ground floor in this position, here, you come in at the front, that occupies most of the ground floor. For the flat above, you come in at the side, and simply work your way up the stairs, and then you're in the flat above. To all intent and purpose, you wouldn't know that that was technically flats. It looks like a house, but there are two good-sized affordable units, rented units inside. In terms of the layout, each has access to its own garden. So the first floor has windows that look out onto its own garden, so you're not having the neighbour looking into your garden. And the ground floor, again, their own garden, with a direct access straight out into their own garden. So there's adequate room for children to play, outdoor drying. The use of masonettes, I think, is a very good way of delivering one-bed units in a way that gives everyone good amenity space. Simple bungalows. Again, interesting street scenes. I'll just quickly take you through a series of those. On this one, the grade buildings are set back in the distance. So between the grey building and ourselves is the back garden. But what we've got are brick walls and all the principal prominent frontages, so there are no close boarded fences, and then there are trees. This is an important part of the broad road frontage, so you'll notice when we get to landscaping there will be a new hedgerow planted here, and between those you come out on a new path. So again, soft edges to that development, and the development is set back from the road. Just some more examples of those street views. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest neighbour sits here, the green triangle, which is this house here. These are bungalows immediately adjacent, and there is a 17-metre gap. There would be no issue of overlooking, one, because it's a bungalow, and two, because of the distance of the immediate neighbour. And again, through discussion, the bungalows were sited here in order to deliver that safeguard to the amenity of neighbours. This shows where we've got the 1.8 metre high brick walls in all the key visual points in order to enhance and secure good townscape. We've tracked all the refuse collection arrangements. Our waste service is very satisfied with the arrangements being made by Keep Moat. Parking, again, on this site we have no examples of triplex parking, so I'm sure members will be pleased to see that we have at last a scheme where there is no triplex parking. Arrangements, each property has access to its own spaces, so for example at the top there are two spaces in front of that unit in green. That's how they work. On the corner, they have direct access to their parking spaces. Some of the houses have them adjacent to the house on a private driveway, and then the yellow dots are visitor parking. There is very good level of visitor parking across the site. Not on the street, but in specific spaces that will not be conveyed with the properties. And the same happens on the southern end of the site, and you can see the arrangements. Good visitor parking again, and there's actually some parking spaces around the play space, although we would expect residents here to be walking to the facility. Extensive suds network with a basin in this corner, and this also helps to separate the houses from the railway, which goes southwest, northeast on the edge. We are comfortable now that all the relevant drainage authorities are satisfied with the drainage details. We've had confirmation from them now. What we are also looking at is, when it comes to the detailed landscaping, which we are conditioning, we will ensure that there are the right species for wetland habitats, as well as creating a broad and diverse new habitats across the site. And you'll notice, because of the ditch, and other connections, we're actually creating or reinforcing the natural wildlife corridors through the site and then along the railway and up into the countryside. In terms of the basin, it will be dry most of the year, but there's enough capacity in there for a 1 in 2 year flood event, 1 in 30 year flood event, and then a 1 in 100 year plus 40% climate change event. So our drainage colleagues at Suffolk County are very pleased with the details, and as I say, we will ensure that the species planted within and around are suitable for a wetland habitat. But members will recall what we won't be advocating is the use of bulrushes because of their invasive nature. And again, there's a smaller basin just to the south. In terms of landscaping, we are pleased with the strategic landscaping in terms of those parts of the site that are due to be landscaped, but we are requiring further detail in terms of the species through condition. So you'll probably have wildflower meadows set amongst the trees in these positions, reinforcing existing planting, and we'll have a new planting belt behind the basin. So between the basin, the houses and the railway, there will be a new planting strip. Good surveillance of all of those spaces from frontages or the sides of properties with bay windows and other windows at first floor. So again, we're very pleased with security and safety. On the northern edge, that is a dense existing belt of trees and hedgerow. Houses on that point will back onto that. Just to reinforce what's happening on the road frontage, we have the vision, this is the southern end, so we have vision splay, which will remove a little bit of the existing hedgerow. There is an existing ditch that will be retained and form part of the SUD system. There is a new footpath, sorry, that's a new hedgerow that's going to be planted, and then we have the new footpath. And you'll notice that on a map, this is north, this is south, so you'd be able to come from this estate, use this new path, and come out onto a new section of footway that will take you right the way around and under the railway bridge. So we are knitting this development into the rest of Bacton, which most of Bacton is to the west of the railway bridge, but we are ensuring that we knit this community in with the rest of the community in Bacton. There's part of the internal footpath system. That's a very quick shot, just showing you that under the outline planning permission, we'll get a section of new footway. The existing small section of footway here will be widened. The existing footpath here, grey, is retained, and then we have the improvements under the bridge. This, I think, this scheme is achieving new levels of sustainability in terms of what members ask us as officers to secure. This goes way beyond your policies. And I think it's important to note that we have 100% NDSS achieved on the site. 100% of the units will achieve Part M2 of the building, Part M42 of the building regs. And we will see 100% air source heat pumps on the site. We also see the new footway coming through as part of this development, which assists connectivity. We will get ecological mitigation. I've started to explain how we will increase biodiversity on the site. And we will get full electric vehicle charging. So were you minded to approve these details, I think this would set a new benchmark against which we would judge other developers in how far are they going to respond to the climate emergency and start to think about the post-gas boiler era. So our recommendation to you is set out in the report. We are recommending approving all of the conditions that have been asked of us. We're asking that you give the Chief Planning Officer the authority to issue those. We'll just tidy up the responses we've received, but we're now confident that all our consultees are in favour of approving the conditions. and then to grant reserved matters approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vince. That was a very clear presentation, lots of information imparted to us there. Members, do you have questions? Councillor Caston, then Councillor Matheson, then Councillor Stringer, and then we'll go with the committee to start with. Did Councillor Warboys have your vague hand up? Okay, and then I'll come to Councillor Mellon. Okay, in that order then, please. Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much. I haven't quite got to grips with the frontage of this. You said that there's the new hedge going in down beside Broad Road. Is there a hedge being planted on the north end of Broad Road and the south end, but there's a bit in the middle that's got no hedge? Could you just clear that up, please?
Thank you, Councillor Keston. I didn't necessarily explain that very well. What I should have said is that the existing hedgerow north of the access road will be retained. So I was largely focusing on the frontage south of the access road because that is where the new hedgerow will be planted. Now let's see if we can. There we are. So north, this is existing hedgerow. That is not affected by the vision display. So it's in this section where some of the planting that's already there has to be taken out to achieve the vision display, and this is the section of, sorry, this is, yeah, all of this is new hedgerow. Does that?
Yes, thank you. That's great.
Thank you for that. Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, I fear that's just confused me more, actually. I thought half of the frontage was without hedge at the moment, and I also saw one of the plans showing how much the hedging that were being removed. Is that's all? Have we got the plan of that one that shows the removal? Yeah, I thought there was one that actually showed what was removed. But my question really is should we not be putting the access point such in the stretch that hasn't got any hedge, so that we don't have to remove any hedge? Really, that's question one. I have others. Want to do them one at a time?
Yeah, I think so.
If we quickly go back so that we can see the. Ooh. No. Just going to go so we can see the whole of the site. Oh, there we are. So here we have existing hedge. That is retained. You're right, this section appeared not to have any hedge, but I suspect there are still some remnants of hedge in there. But when that photograph was taken, this was open. So it's this section south of the access to this corner that would have the new hedgerow. Well, let's say, you could actually say a hedgerow where there doesn't appear to be one might be the best way to describe it. But I hear what you say, why can't the access go in here? But this is virtually midway in order to achieve good vision in both directions. The ideal location on a straight road for an access is broadly in the middle. So there is minimal damage to any existing flora, even by having an access in this position. And what we're doing is actually enhancing flora along the frontage. But the good news is that the established hedge that you saw, and I didn't explain this very well, is actually being retained.
Yeah. I mean, that showing the removal of a hedge that isn't there anywhere, I think I'm happy enough with that. So, yes. I wanted to have another look at the 1.8 metre walls. They're quite big things. I wonder whether that was, I think it was slide 25 or 24.
Thank you, Councillor. That helps us. Let's quickly shoot through if we can. Yes. So here we have a wall connecting two side gardens. Again, connecting between two side gardens. This is the curved wall around a corner. These are all in what you might say are prominent visual positions. 1.8 metre, it's not as tall as me. It is a standard height for a boundary. It isn't the low wall, but then you wouldn't expect a low brick wall to enclose, effectively, private gardens. So each of these is a private garden behind. So it gives the privacy, but in terms of townscape, that is much, I would argue, is a much nicer detail than a close-boarded fence, which often starts to deteriorate far quicker than a brick wall. The benefit with a brick wall, of course, is it should last for a much longer time and stay in good condition. Whereas you start to see people painting their fences different colour or staining them different colours, and it all starts to look a bit hodgepodge. So from an urban design point of view, you would want to see brick enclosing walls in prominent locations, something we try and achieve across all new developments.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I mean, I as I say, it was a bit quick, and I wanted to have a look at it. But I think the only question that I've got now, I see it carefully, is if the ones facing Broad Road, those sides to Broad Road, I mean, we've got a hedge and a ditch there as well. I mean, I can entirely see the point of the urban design, etc., where those sides are facing to the roads, which all the others are. I just wondered, whether really walls were a bit excessive there, and it would be nicer to actually just develop the hedge a bit thicker or something.
Can I just ask, John, that you bring that up when we have a bit of a debate?
I've got the understanding.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, very useful points. Now then, Councillor Stringer, I think, was next, weren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for a bit of clarity on the hedge, the existing hedge goes from the watercourse north, the entire length of the site. So according to the plan you issue, 50% of the existing hedge will be removed. Just for clarity. You can look at it on Street View, it's there. The picture was taken in July 2021. Just wanted to clarify a few points. This won't be the first time ever there was a footpath connecting the village to this part, the two parts of the village. There was one that went over the railway up until 1962, and it's still there. There is a ramp that goes either side of the bridge, but it's been cut off by Network Rail in 1962. Just also, you said that you pointed to dwellings that were the nearest to existing dwellings. There are some other dwellings proposed on this site that are nearer to approved dwellings. There are some approved dwellings in the back garden of Mispah, and they will be directly looking window to window on the proposed development. You just wanted to ask, you suggested that the new path will assist...
Councillor Stringer, can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
That point that you've made there, I wonder if it might help us all to understand it and not
Yeah,
forget
of course,
it.
yeah, sorry.
Could you put up the plan which just demonstrates what Councillor Stringer is advising us of? It would certainly help my understanding. Sorry to interrupt the flow, but...
That plan, that plan helps. So does that one.
Right.
If you see where the green arrow is,
Yeah.
right where that red pointer just was,
Yeah.
keep
Was or
going
is
left with there. There are two new dwellings approved right there that face north. So they're facing the row of dwellings that are on the proposed site. So when you said the nearest dwelling that will be overlooked, that's actually not strictly true.
And do we know the distance between the dwellings and their back garden to the back garden of these and the other dwellings?
Yeah, they're about 3.5 to 4 metres away, the width of an access.
You mean the gardens or the properties?
Properties.
So they don't have a garden at their...
Not at the front, no. They have a garden at the rear of them.
Right.
The access
But
goes...
there's a road in between, isn't there?
There is. There's an
There's a road in between.
So it's just
Yeah.
the width of the access driveway.
But there is a road in between, got you.
Okay. Yeah.
But there's still a road in between, is what I'm trying to
No.
establish. No.
No.
I'm confused.
Right. Okay, and the third point, you mentioned that the new pathway will assist connectivity. Is that also for cyclists?
The path is 2 metres, not 3 metres, so it wouldn't be the shared footway cycleway.
Sorry, did you say it would or it wouldn't? Wouldn't. Councillor Warboys, did you have a question now you've heard what you've heard?
I can put a couple in, yes, I've been thinking. The first one, it relates to the previous slide and Councillor Stringer's comments. The 70-metre gardens, will the development rights in those gardens be prescribed or in order to maintain those as buffers?
Is that something we could consider when we go into debate, Vince?
We can, and if we haven't removed it in outline, I would say that is a very good suggestion.
We'll come into debate on that, but the question is at the moment, no, at the moment, I would suggest.
The second question is with regards to the, I do find it's good that there's so many swales and attenuation basins and ditches and whatever. What provision has been made for the ongoing maintenance of these?
That is something we can certainly ask our guests from Keepmoat to respond to, because a lot of it will be under management company.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's very interesting. That's a point I'd got ready to ask, but you've done that for us. Thank you very much indeed. So one more question from our committee member, and then I'll come to Councillor. Oh no, we've got others. Go on, Councillor Carston.
Thank you very much. We've got some houses quite near to a raised up rail track there. Have we looked into the noise levels for those houses nearest to the railway?
We have, and our environmental health colleagues who deal with noise are satisfied that suitable attenuation can be achieved.
Mr. Matheson again?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky doing it electronically. On page 107, I think we're promised a verbal update on the contentious, was contentious issue of the mix of the affordables. And there's apparently references page 138 in my note there, which is indeed the comments from the Housing Enabling Officer. They were unhappy. So are they now sufficiently happy? Because we're not getting what they originally asked for, clearly.
I'm grateful to you, Councillor Matheson. I should have, of course, said on the tabled papers we have got their updated comments. So apologies for not pointing it out at the front. They are very happy now that the mix, as amended through discussion, now is what they required in the first place.
So that's a verbal update.
It is. So apologies. I should have said at the start, to be fair to you, Councillor.
Councillor Mellon, I think we can let you loose with your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor String has already asked one of them, but I have a few others. So, first one, the Section 106 agreement doesn't mention a sum for the footway works. Is there a sum set aside for that, and is that limited in amounts? Another question on the footway is, part of the footway, the existing footway, you said is to be retained, but I'm aware that that footway is not 2 metres wide at that point because it's between the highway and people's front gardens. It's probably a metre or maybe a little bit more. Is that proposed to be improved or widened somehow? I've got a few other questions. Should we start with those then?
The Grampian condition doesn't fix a sum, so under the Section 278 agreement, it'll cost what it'll cost in order to get approved by Suffolk County Council. The section of retained footway cannot be widened, so it will remain as it is. That was the grey section on that plan.
Okay, thank you. A question on the pumping station. I'm a little bit concerned about the siting of that because it's very near one of the approved dwellings from the back garden of Mizpah, which is that long strip along the south of the development. And it's also very close to the dwelling to the west, which is called Mallard's, which is accessed from Pound Hill. I just wonder whether that could have been sited somewhere else, or whether there's any noise effect from that pumping station.
What we can do is we'll ask our guests how much scope there is for adjusting the position of the pumping station. They tend to work on topography, however, it is a pumping station. So if we could park that, Councillor Mellon, we'll ask our guests from an engineering point of view the extent to which they could move that in order to overcome your understandable concerns. Then let's see what we get in discussion, and then we can take it from there if that's acceptable to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the bundle. Our environmental officer, Peter Chisnell, on page 143 of the bundle, says a sustainability and energy strategy must be provided. I wasn't clear that that has been provided. And then I have a question about the attenuation basins. Are they open or fenced?
Energy is subject to a condition within the outline application, so that is a matter that will be discharged separately. But what I have done is explain to the committee just how far Keepmoat are willing to go in order to satisfy the council's aspirations to tackle climate change. Technically, that isn't part of the reserved matters, but I thought it was important to share that with you this morning, so that would be dealt with separately. Sorry, Councillor, your second point. Attenuation. Yeah. At the moment, there is no intention to put a post and rail fence around them, but what we have secured, and you'll recall from previous presentations that here, Suffolk County Council like to see a 1 in 4 gradient on the margins, which is actually better than the ROSPA requirement at 1 in 3. So what we have is a series of shelves where we have a gentle slope at 1 in 4, then a level plateau, and then a slope again at 1 in 4, and that enables people to get out of the pond should they happen to fall in it easily. So the question is, I suspect we could have a post and rail fence around it, but to what extent will that keep people out? And to what extent do we actually want some sort of chestnut paling fence around it? Because most of the time it'll be dry and it actually supplements the play and facilities and informal recreation on the estate. But it would be possible to have a post and rail fence around it if members thought that was appropriate. But bear in mind that we achieve a much higher safety standard in terms of the profile than even ROSPA suggest.
Thank you for that. That was another question I had written down as well, so we're all thinking from the same thing. Have you got any further questions at this point? I just have one question myself. I noticed the layout of the proposed site. What about the turning, safety for tankers, dustbin collection, etc.?
The good news, Chair, is that we have obviously checked all the swept paths, and the layout is designed to allow all of those movements safely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but has there been any assessment of the noise level that might be created by 65 heat pumps on the site, given the the density is about, 23 per hectare, isn't it? They're not silent pieces of equipment, or at least not in my experience. So has there been any assessment made of the likely noise level created by heat pumps only warming these dwellings? Thank you.
It isn't an issue that has been raised by our environmental health noise colleagues, and it has been clear from the start that this scheme will include 100% air source heat pumps.
Thank you very much. Again, another interesting question. I've had something similar locally.
So, through you, Chair, may I ask one point? Might it help discussion if my colleague Mandy was able to pull up the plan for the site that Councillor Mellon referred to, just so we can, before you launch into discussion, we can actually...
Oh, sorry, I thought I've got a voice like you. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Mell will read the Parish Council's statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just received this late last night, and unfortunately they're not able to be here, but they've asked me to read it. They're kind of responding to Vincent's responses, so I'll try and sort of make it flow. The Parish Council objects to the geometric layout, and the officer seems to dismiss this concern by stating that other aspects of the scheme, the open space and the landscape, are an improvement over the original proposals relating to those aspects, and by commenting on the scale and form of the individual proposed units. First, we would point out that there is a flaw in this approach. Amelioration of one aspect of a proposal does not simply cancel out the undesirability of another aspect. Improvements in landscaping will be welcome, but this does not change the geometric nature of this iteration of the proposal. Similarly, the statement that the scale and form of units is sympathetic to those found in the immediate area may be true, but does not change the nature of the layout, which is what the Parish Council's comments refer to, and is what we feel has been given insufficient consideration and weight in the officer's response. The proposed layout is incontrovertibly geometric, and this is not sympathetic to either the adjacent existing development or the vast majority of the rest of the village, where even apparently straight roads have arcs and kinks in them and which sit at irregular angles to each other. A grid is an undoubtedly urban form of layout, and the Parish Council hopes very much the committee will not grant permission for what constitutes an urbanisation of a rural village. Then they go on to talk about the concern about the footway. The Parish Council accepts that this site is segregated from the rest of the village, and this is one of the reasons that it has ongoing concerns. We're pleased that provision for pedestrians was conditioned in the outline permission, but it is felt in order for the condition to be meaningful, cognizance must be taken of the problems that relate to realistic implementation at this stage, even if the detail of the provision itself is outside this stage of determination. Otherwise, there is a high risk that the conditions the planning authority has imposed will eventually prove to be impractical or unaffordable, and so fall by the wayside along with trust in the planning process itself. The railway bridge is already narrow and there is no safe way to accommodate two-way traffic, plus cyclists or pedestrians, let alone all at the same time. The Parish Council strongly recommends that the need for proper consideration of this problem is at least referred to in any decision arising from the committee meeting today, and that ideally this is required to be addressed before any above ground work is carried out. The Parish Council would ask whether Highways were aware in advance of the grant of outline permission that provision of the footpath under the bridge would be made a condition.
You've got 10 seconds or
I
5.
think I'll stop it there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of long words in there, but hopefully I got the sense of it.
I think they're covering old ground that is not relevant to today in some of that, but certainly an anxiety understood. Thank you for that. Now, if you'd like to draw breath, you're ready to go again with your statement, isn't it? Oh, no, sorry, Kate. I beg your pardon, Kate Holland. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I've got all sorts of scribbles here. Would you like to give us your 3 minutes, please? Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Kate Holland of Invicta Planning. I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant, Keepmoat Homes. As members will be aware, the site benefits from an extant outline planning permission with all matters reserved for 65 homes. It was granted in December 2020. This application is for reserved matters consent for the detailed landscaping and layout of the site, the design of the dwellings and the site access. Prior to the submission of the application, we undertook extensive pre-application engagement with both the District and County Council, including planning, housing, highways and drainage, and as a result, a number of amendments were made to the application, including enhancements to the external appearance of the dwellings. This has included the provision of architectural detailing incorporating exposed rafter feet, flat top brick arches, decorative horizontal brick banding, door canopies and additional windows to the side elevation. The development proposals accord with the parameters of the outline planning permission, maintaining the approved housing mix, site access point and layout principles. The proposals include the provision of 2 bungalows, 2 one-bedroom apartments, together with a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom homes. The development as a whole provides a mix of smaller dwellings rather than some of the larger properties indicated as part of the outline consent in order to better meet local needs. All homes would comply with the nationally described space standards and building regulations part M42. This would mean they'd be flexible and adaptable for future residents throughout their lifetime. The inclusion of smaller homes has allowed for the open space areas to be increased in size, with ample room for the provision of the play area and surface water drainage features. A significant focus has been given to the overall sustainability of the proposals, and an energy statement was provided with the application. The development will be fully electric with no gas provision. The homes will benefit from increased thermal efficiency and will be served by air source heat pumps. Overall, the dwellings would achieve a reduction in CO2 emissions of 40% and a reduction in energy demand of 60%. The properties would provide a reduction in water usage, and those dwellings with on-plot parking would have access to electric vehicle charging points. We'd like to take the opportunity to thank officers for working with us to develop these proposals and to thank members for their time today and their consideration of the points made in this statement.
Thank you very much indeed. You're well in time there. And I'm sure our members will have some questions for you. I know Councillor Mellon wants to pick up one earlier on in a minute, but Councillor Matheson, you wanted to ask a question.
Thank you. Yes. Could I point you towards page 142 in the paperwork, which is our Sustainability Officer, Peter Chisnell's comments of September. I think they're the only... There wasn't a later one, I don't think. If you look sort of halfway down that page, if you up with us, yeah, it's disappointing that the actual fabric specification of the external walls, etc., is so we're not doing as much as we could be doing with the fabric. I wonder if you could comment on that, and then also the following paragraph, which criticises the permeability of air, air tightness, I think we usually call it briefly, you know, whether you couldn't be doing something better than that. And second question really, there's an awful lot of electric demand built into this, which is fine, but are we not going to produce any electricity on the site one way or another?
I think on the fabric point and the air permeability, I think they're slightly in excess of building regulations. And I think from a commercial aspect, it was the air source heat pumps where we focused the sort of additional spend on sustainability aspects. So we haven't got, I think you alluded to PV panels, for instance, to support the air source heat pumps as well.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's only questions, John, rather than
Yeah.
debate.
Well, would you consider offering them to buyers, buying off plan and so on?
Yeah, as a sort of additional item to
yeah,
that
I mean,
specification.
our constant point about this is that once you've
John,
got the
you've asked the
scaffolding up,
question, we just don't need to debate
it's
it.
cheaper
please.
to do it then rather than retrofitting.
Yeah.
You can listen to what's saying, yeah, and have you a response?
Sorry, yeah, we can look at that as a add-on for home purchases, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Councillor Caston, then Councillor Stringer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're looking at quite a considerable amount of hedge being taken out of here. It looks to be 7 metres thick in places and about 60 metres long. There is more hedge going in. I might not be right about that. I'm doing that off Google Earth, the measuring tool. Can you talk me through the biodiversity net gain on this site and how we're making up for that habitat and that harbourage being taken away?
So we have submitted a report which shows the biodiversity enhancements on the site. We haven't done the biodiversity net gain assessment to support that yet, but we do. In reference to the hedgerow, I've been looking at the AAA, and it is a sort of section of the hedge, so some of it will be retained where it can be, that's outside of the visibility display coming south. Going north, the visibility display is mainly to the right-hand side or the east of the existing hedgerow, which is why most of it can be retained. And then on the landscape master plan, we do sort of supplement where we lose hedge on the southern side by bringing it inside of the visibility display and re-establishing that hedgerow, as Vincent's alluded to earlier, for, I think, all of that boundary going south. And additionally, where there isn't hedgerow on that southern portion between the bottom edge of the site and the ditch, we put a hedgerow in for that whole extent where there's currently no hedgerow.
Yeah, just to clarify, so you will demonstrate a biodiversity net gain, but you haven't
Not yet, no.
completed that work yet?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that something we need to put in a condition, Vince, or not?
It's a good point, Councillor Caston. We are looking at discharging condition 10, which is biodiversity enhancement strategy. My suggestion is, if you agree the recommendation, that one of the things that the Chief Planning Officer will need to do in connection with condition 10 is ensure that we have received that additional information before he discharges condition 10, and that way we can be sure that it hasn't slipped through the net.
That sounds eminently satisfactory. If I can see heads nodding, right. Thank you, Councillor Caston. Councillor Stringer, I think, is next, and then Councillor Warboys.
Just want to point at 2 points. One is on the clarification about heating. You suggested that putting in air source heat pumps was an extra cost that you were investing in the fabric of this. Given that the nearest gas main is 3 villages away, and the oil central heating, given the building regulations on storage of oil, would have meant you couldn't have fitted this amount of houses on the site, and if you had a gas tank buried on the site somewhere, you would have also lost some houses. What were the other options that would have been less costly?
That was the other option. So we have explored the beneath ground gas, and in the very early days did have a proposal, the same at Finningham Road. The site we took to committee a month ago, we had a proposal for gas beneath the ground, which was significantly cheaper than the air source heat pump option, but we chose to pursue the air source heat pump option. The actual gas, the amount of area that's needed for the below ground gas storage is actually less than I originally thought it would need, and could have been incorporated into the proposals.
One other thing, although the Chair has suggested that how this site will eventually connect to the village is not for this meeting, however, sustainability is something that we're looking at in encouraging the use of sustainable modes of transport. And to get sight of that is difficult if we can't see the plan. Does the Section 278 plan exist? Has it been submitted to the County Council?
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, we've had a first round of comments from the county.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I flagged my question up earlier. It's really to do with the provision for the ongoing maintenance of the replacement planting, the water attenuation basins, the swales, the ditches and so on, which are quite extensive.
Yeah, so I'll cover all of the sort of maintenance aspects. So the highways, the public open space, and the surface water drainage will be part of a management company, which there'll be provisions in place to ensure that they are maintained in line with an agreed specification. The foul water pump station and the foul water network will be managed by an IWNL, which are essentially an independent water company that operate exactly the same as Anglian Water do. They're regulated by Ofwat, governed by the same codes of practice, etc. So in summary, the foul water pump station and drainage will be adopted. The rest of the drainage highways will be under a management company.
And sorry, how will this management company be funded?
So residents pay a annual charge for the management company, which when you take out the aspect of the foul water pump station, which would usually be quite a hefty fee onto the management company charge, the highways and drainage are pretty standard. We do it on a lot of our developments.
Okay, so the whole thing will be self-sustaining?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
While you're on that subject, Councillor Mellon asked the question, I think it was you, wasn't it, about moving the substation potentially, wasn't it? And I think somebody asked about moving it because of some issue of any sound attenuation. Is there likely to be any movement with the topography of it?
I've just been looking at the scope for moving it. I think the first thing to say is I think on one of the plans there was a brown, suitably coloured circle around the foul water pump station which showed the sort of offsets that are required. And I think it's about 12 metres, and that shows that it goes to the edge of the site boundary south-west. There's then a bit of a gap between the dwellings to the east, and then obviously you've got public open space to the north. But in terms of being able to actually move that, it could be nudged north a bit more so that it was further away from the houses to the south that you're saying that have got the consent that we discussed earlier. That may need quite a bit of a reshape of the attenuation basin, but it could possibly be nudged north.
When we go into debate, we'll have a discussion as to whether that would be a suitable arrangement, and obviously through the planning officer with your good selves at some time. So, Councillor Mellon, did you have any questions? Boys was already on to it, and I thought we mustn't miss it.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand how much noise there would come from that pumping station.
I don't know what decibels the noise is. All I know is that the sort of regulated offset is that, and that's to cover noise, smells, etc., affecting any nearby residents.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could have that plan of the neighbouring consent shown to us so that we can see how close that house is.
Yeah, just before we do, can I just ask the legal officer, it isn't actually relevant, well, it is relevant to the discussion we're having, but it is not this application we're discussing. It's an application outside the site. Would it be appropriate for us to show that, to demonstrate the distances that have been raised by some of the members?
It's the right hand. That's okay. I think it would be appropriate in this case. I mean, it's for clarification purposes, and it would aid the discussion.
Thank you. I just wanted legal clarification on that. So we now have that available. So if we can pop that up, please. Not sure it actually does an awful lot. But is that what you alluded to, whoever brought that up? Was that you, Councillor Stringer? Yeah. Or Councillor Mellon? I'm not sure who brought it up.
Yeah, if you look to the far left of the red box, that property there, which obviously isn't under construction yet, is right up against the boundary of that plot and the plot we're considering today. There's no roadway in between. There is on the middle plot, in the middle, the one where the pointer is now. Yeah.
Yes, Vince, yes.
Yeah, this is the side wall of that property. So I understand the point you're making about if the pumping station's in this sort of position, what might the impact be? But this is the side wall. The entrance to that property is there. So this is actually looking in this direction. You're quite right in terms of this unit has an access from this point. But you recall the distance in here between properties was 17 metres. This is actually, the properties here will, when we go back, are further away. So we are achieving the minimum 20 that your standards require in terms of building to building separation. So I'm grateful, Councillor Mellon, that you pointed that out, because it does enable us to look at this plan. But I am satisfied that all the necessary standards that you would normally apply are met.
Thank you very much. Councillor Caston, you have a question?
Thank you very much. So we've heard that SUDs are going to be maintained for a fee to householders.
Thank you.
The roadways, it doesn't seem like the highways will adopt those from the paperwork. Could you just talk about the maintenance of those going forward?
So they'll fall under the same management company that manage the POS and the drainage. So there'll be a maintenance regime of cleaning gully pots, etc., repairing roads when they need to be repaired. That'll all come under the same management company remit, which is quite standard for a lot of our development sites, particularly when they're of the smaller nature.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, all the roadways and the SUDs and so on, that maintenance company, management company. So how do the affordable houses fit into that scheme? In terms of their rent and so on.
So the affordable housing provider pays the management company charge. The affordable housing provider that we speak to up front usually say we can only pay up to, say, £220 per month, and it won't exceed that. And typically our management company charges, they won't exceed the upper limit of what they're willing to pay. So that's thought about up front with the affordable housing providers that we work with, and they pay it, the residents don't, in the instance of affordable rent units.
Thank you very much.
£220 per what? Per
year.
The site?
Per year, per
house.
That's just as an example.
It was an example, John.
Yeah.
So, I think it's interesting, the points being brought up, because these sort of things are happening all the time on these estates, aren't they? Anyway, that's for debate in a minute, but Councillor Byrne, yes, a question, please, for the applicant.
Just a quick and small clarification point again on air source heat pumps. The system that they will connect to, will it be an underfloor heating system? And if so, will it be on both floors of a two-floor property?
It won't be an underfloor heating system, it'll just be panel radiators. The underfloor heating system is usually a lot more beneficial when you've got much larger properties that require better sort of space heating performance than radiators can provide.
And just one question, I know Vince is going to ask a question. For the flats, is there a good sound attenuation between the two properties?
Yes, there will be. So there's a different construction detail between the ground floor masonette and the first floor masonette than you typically get in a normal house. So yeah.
Thank you. It's just that I know that if you have, say, stud walls upstairs, you can hear people hammering around all the time. So
yeah, it won't be like so. It's a typical construction detail, which is a lot more robust than any standard one you'd get in a two-storey dwelling.
Vince, I believe, has a question for the applicant.
With your
That's
permission,
correct.
Chair, thank you.
Yes.
In the light of comments made by Councillor Mellon and Councillor Stringer, and I know we've said that the footpath issue is outside of the scope of this, but I think it would be interesting to hear directly from you, James, how you see the system within condition 12 biting on your development. So the idea that you have to get the details approved and your section 27 in place before you can commence, presumably you are aware of that. How will that impact your programme, and what is your ideal programme for getting this site moving?
Well, we're working on the Section 27 agreement at the minute with the county. We're working with highways also. I'm not too sure on what the detailed programme is, but we won't be, for instance, plan to start on site tomorrow because we've got ecology works to finish off on the site. So we need to wait for March to hit, the weather to get warm, and then commence on site later in the summer. So I don't know the detailed programme. I don't know where we're at with county on the highways 278.
Thank you very much indeed. And now, I think if all the questions have been asked, if we can hear from Councillor Mellon, the ward member, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's quite a long history of applications to this site, which I'll go through briefly if I may. But just start by welcoming the fact that there's going to be air source heat pumps throughout, that there will be electric vehicle charging points provided, and I like the visual details which the officer has outlined. It's good to see those there. I have to say I'm not particularly keen on the layout. The number of homes on this site means the site is tight. It is tucked in between the B113 and the railway, and it is a dense development. And as the parish councillor pointed out, it is linear, kind of boxy design. I think the officer even used the phrase townscape. It does look urban. The gardens are small, and although there is some open space, most of it is attenuation basins, which I have to say I'm not sure is terribly useful space. So just to go back to the previous history on this site, outline permission was granted in 2015. I think it was 49 homes at that time, but the site could not be sold, and this permission lapsed. And then we had a new application for 65 homes, so increasing the density of the site. And that was approved at outline, and the committee met in September 2019. It's quite a long while ago, but actually the decision was not published till 14 months later. So even though there was a tight 18-month limit for reserve matters to come through, they were given an extra time by the decision not being published for 14 months. And the most contentious point about this site is the fact that the site is distant from the services and facilities in Bacton. It is up the other end of the village from the shop, the pub, the doctors. There's also that physical separation from the bulk of the village, as we saw on the slides, because of the main rail line to Norwich passing through the village. And the only access from this application site through to the main part of the village is via this low, narrow bridge under the railway. And currently there's no footway under the bridge, and so pedestrians have to literally take their lives in their hands and scoot through between the traffic. So the provision of a footway, a protected footway, is going to be a real benefit from this site. There is a problem at that bridge in that the sight lines for drivers approaching the bridge are problematic. The road is not straight, but it's slightly angled, and so you can't see through the bridge until you're right at it. So this was a point of much discussion back at Committee A in 2019, and members were very concerned to have a safe and suitable scheme drawn up to be approved along with the reserve matters. And I had a look at the committee action sheet, and it makes for interesting reading because of the 4 things that are highlighted, it said that a condition for full technical details of the proposed footway scheme to be submitted concurrent with reserve matters for agreement and with the agreement of Suffolk County Council. But when the outline permission was actually published 14 months later, this seemed to have been downgraded, and that's the condition 12 that we've dwelt on today, page 165 of your bundle. So this is the reason we don't have the design before us today for the footway under the bridge. And I have to say I regret that. If ever there was an application that hinged on a single issue, this one is it. Without a safe route for pedestrians and cyclists under the bridge, the residents of these houses will be completely dependent on the car. So it's critical that the design of the footway and its associated works is correct for the particular circumstances of this bridge and the configuration of the roads approaching to it. It's not something you could do with an off-the-peg design. And what has been shown to us in previous designs is a kind of give and go system where the engineering and build outs would cause drivers to pause before proceeding. But I'm not convinced that this is the right solution. We've had reference to the triple lock, but that still means we're dependent on Suffolk County Council agreeing the scheme. And I would much have preferred to have seen it before us today, and I would really encourage members of the committee to defer this application until we've seen the detailed design for the bridge. Thank you, Chair.
Just before I have questions from members, can I just concur with the legal officer that the 106 agreement, to which you really alluded to at the end, is not what we are debating today in the matters before us. And just to point out that the section 278 is concurrently with Suffolk County Council, but we don't have the details, I do admit. But can I just ask with legal, is that we are right in thinking that sadly, although that's one of the biggest issues, it's what we are deciding today is what's on the paperwork. Can I have legal advice, please?
Yes, Chair, that is right. You are looking at a reserve matters application today, so you're looking at what's on the table in front of you. I appreciate these are all bound up in that, but the principle of development has been accepted, and that was one of the principal issues. So whilst it is in your mind, you are actually looking at the reserve matters, and I think Vincent did a good job of explaining that at the beginning of his presentation. So we do have to concentrate on the reserve matters. We've had some confirmation that the 278 agreement is being looked at, but we haven't got the details of that. And the condition does say that prior to occupation, it has to be sorted out. So the risk does lie with the developer in that case, that, you know, if they are not going to comply with that condition, they can't, none of those properties can be occupied. And I think probably that's enough from me.
Thank you. Can I just correct it? I think it was before they started. Vince, could you agree?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very involved, and I understand.
That's the joy of the triple lock, that it means that if the section 278 is not agreed, Keep Moat could not commence. So we will have the confidence of knowing that there is an approved section 278 or not. And then at that point, Keep Moat will have to determine what happens next.
So, yes, Councillor Mellon first and then Councillor Matheson. Yeah. Sorry, but I just needed clarity on what we are looking at today.
That's fine. If it's, with your permission, Chair, could I ask the legal officer just to confirm, because there's clearly been a change between what was agreed at the outline committee, which was recorded on the action sheet, that element was to come forward concurrent with reserve matters, and then the condition 12, which is different. So that there's a kind of legal space there, which I actually want to understand.
But can I just clarify that we have been told it is with Suffolk County Council, so that means it's running concurrently. But, as you quite rightly asked, we need the legal confirmation on it, and I understand.
Thank you. I do feel a little bit on the spot here because, as you did point out, there's a whole lot of history here. I think from the action sheet is one thing. It would be a checking of the resolution and the minutes to find out exactly how that translated into the minutes, to see whether what was issued at outline stage actually, transposed that into the permission and the conditions. So I don't think it's something that I can give you any more information on here without checking the resolution. And, it's one of those terrible phrases, we are where we are with it now. It's some time since the outline was granted. and I think we need to have a look at what's, we need to determine what's on the table in front of us.
Right, thank you. Councillor Matheson did have a question.
Yeah, well, I had this noted, this precise question really, as to whether or at what point in the past or the future any committee would have actually looked at this proposal to address the bridge. And
so what is your question?
My
We're not
question,
quite into
yeah,
debate
absolutely. My question, absolutely, is a very clear one, and that is, how did it come about? And this is more or less what Councillor Mellon is asking. How did it come about that we, from having just said we wanted it concurrent with reserved matters, it got changed
So Vince,
to what's
can you
there
answer
now?
can you answer us as to where we are on that point?
I too would want to look back at the minutes, but I would also accept that the section 278 is submitted concurrently with the reserved matters. One comes to us and the other goes to Suffolk County Council.
Well, okay, well, that's for us to debate in a minute. Councillor, wait a minute, was there someone else just... I'm getting in a muddle. Was it Councillor Stringer next or Councillor Mellon? Had you finished? You've got your... Councillor Stringer, please.
Yeah, I think we're just getting to the nub of this now. It's really good that I can be here to speak to you today. This is the first time, the fourth time, this site has been in front of the committee that at last the person that is the elected county councillor for this area is allowed to speak about the actions of Suffolk County Council here. Because it's absolutely critical. In 1972, there was a protest under this bridge. I was part of it. I was 7 years old. And we were demanding a footpath under this bridge. And we were told by the county council, quote, there is no safe or implementable scheme under that bridge. When I was then elected in 2009 to the county council, I asked the question, can we put a path under this bridge? I was told there's no safe or implementable scheme. Okay. So we then see a planning application that puts that footpath link in. So we ask, can we see the scheme, please? Is it safe? Is it implementable? And all the way through that process, the county council's advice, well, the path could be this wide, it could be that wide. It kept varying.
We're not into debate yet, Councillor. We're into the questions still.
Okay, then
Sorry.
I will...
But what you are raising is something that I think if we can take a 5-minute break for the legal officer to go and look, along with the planning officer to go and look, to see if they can assist us. And then when we go into debate, please, you can be the next person to take the debate
Very kind,
forward.
Chair. I think that would really assist.
Yeah, okay. So can the planning officer and the legal officer and can you just go and see if you can find, and Gemma, can you all go and see? 10 minutes. We'll have 10 minutes to sort of research this. So Thank you very much. We have now legal guidance and the relevant information. So may I pass over to Christine to give us that guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've checked the minutes of that particular meeting, and as is the usual wording, it was resolved subject to the prior agreement of a 106 agreement and conditions on appropriate terms to the satisfaction of the corporate manager, planning for growth to secure. So I'll just hand over to Vincent and he can explain how that was taken on from there.
Thank you, Christine. The discussion around the 106 took a lot longer than anyone imagined because we had the onset of COVID and we were unable to secure the 106 in a timely manner. So by the end of that process, I produced a separate report to the Chief Planning Officer explaining why there had been a delay and that there had been active discussion to try and secure the Section 106 agreement. We set out all the terms and conditions, and the Chief Planning Officer, after giving careful consideration to my report to him, exercised his delegated authority in the way that is shown on the decision notice.
So what that means is that we are discussing and debating only the matter that's before us, which was laid out by Vincent right at the beginning. So, Councillor Stringer, did we actually, I do beg your pardon, I'm sort of losing it a bit myself with all the comings and goings. Had we gone into debate?
Not yet, Chair.
No, we hadn't. So, I think, Councillor, any questions? If you had a question, no, right. Councillor Mellon had spoken and we were asking questions of Councillor Mellon. So does anyone have any questions for Councillor Mellon? No? Right, thank you for your input. So we now do open up for debate. So, Councillor Stringer, if you would like to start that debate off, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding the advice that we've just had, and I perfectly accept that advice, there is a clear disconnect in here between the original decision, which is the third decision on this plot of land, and today. And that is the express will of that original committee that approved the outline to actually have sight of how this site will connect with the main part of the village and how it could do that safely. That has been my concern all along. Sadly, this district council's process is it doesn't allow the county councillor to appear at your deliberations, which frankly I've always thought is an anomaly that should be closed up. In an instance like this, it is utterly critical that the decision maker has had sight of what they're about to approve. And to date, you haven't had that sight. The bridge in Bacton is utterly critical. It is only 6.6 metres wide. It is the route for every pedestrian, every cyclist, every car and every school bus. To put in a 2 metre wide footpath reduces the width of the opening of the bridge so that a bus and a cyclist cannot safely go under the bridge. And it is that particular issue we all along wanted addressed. For me, I totally see where the legal team is coming from by saying this shouldn't form part of your deliberation today. But you do have policies, clear policies, that says you should encourage the use of sustainable modes of transport, including cycling. You, the committee, we, the committee, are the decision maker today. If I were going to vote today, given all of the information I have to hand and all the policies you have, knowing that the Section 278 works have been submitted, I would defer this application so that you can have sight of that, so that you can, with all good conscience, know the decision you make today will increase the use in cycling and not actually cause a safety hazard. I frankly would not trust the county council officers to have to implement all of that for you. I've been on site with them. They've talked about excavating the railway banks to improve sightlines. None of this we've seen in a plan to date. So before you make that decision, I certainly would think hard about that. If you do get anywhere near a decision today, I would ask you to look at a condition about the B1113. If this is going to be constructed, you are on the B1113 is a designated lorry route. It has over 4,500 vehicles a day that traverse it. Most of the sites that are going in Bacton at the moment, there are 5 on the go at the moment, have substantial amounts of parking outside the site. If you were to allow parking along the B1113 to build this site, I think that would be an oversight. All of the parking and deliveries need to be encompassed within this site if we're not to bring about huge chaos in this area. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate, I will not be voting on this because of my proximity to the site.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Who else would like to speak, please? Councillor Caston?
Yeah, so I'd like to go a bit further into this. We do have a triple lock in place. We need to, that is protecting us from not getting this footway. Can you just clarify exactly how that triple lock's going to work? And is that Vincent? Yeah.
Yes, please do, Vince, please do.
Because this is a really important part of this.
I'd also, with your permission, Chair, also tackle the point raised by Councillor Stringer in terms of construction, traffic and associated paraphernalia. There is a requirement for a construction method statement. Part of that will be the location of the compounds, the location of on-site parking for contractors. We will ensure that the construction method statement adequately deals with all those issues, so there is no temptation for anyone to try and park on the B1113. In terms of the triple lock, and there's a danger that we're going back over stuff, but when you saw this previously, our sister committee saw this previously, we had an illustrative layout of the works that had been seen by Suffolk County Council as Highway Authority and had been agreed in principle. So the actual planning permission refers to a drawing which shows the works and then says, despite that, additional detailed drawings are required, and that's where the 278 comes in. So the triple lock is that there can be no commencement on site. So they can keep, if you approve the reserve matters, cannot commence the development. So they can't put foundations in or start putting the drainage runs in. They cannot start on site until the 278 has been submitted, well, we know that's been submitted, and approved. So let's suppose we end up in a position where Suffolk County Council has approved the section 278, Keep Moat can commence. Now the point that Christine was making earlier is they cannot then occupy any of those units until all of those works are in place. And that's how the lock works. You can't start until we know that you've got a scheme that will pass safety order and is part of the 278. Once we know that's secure, you can start, but then you can't occupy until we know that those works have been completed, because as Councillor Stringer said, we don't want new dwellings existing without that important connection being in place, and that's how the system works. So let's think of another scenario. Let's suppose that the 278 is not approved, and let's suppose Keep Moat then start. That then is a matter for the council as to whether it's expedient to take enforcement action. And without wishing to prejudge that, my thought would be, if it was essential to have that footpath connection in place before commencement and Keep Moat were to start, then that suggests that we would be in a position to take action against them. And that's the point about the risk is with the developer, but we have the comfort of knowing that we have that mechanism that will stop them should they proceed without that being in place.
Councillor Caston, you have some more to
Yeah,
come back on it?
just wanted to carry on from that. I feel quite reassured by that. It seems like that's quite a robust way of dealing with this. The no commencement on site is quite an important part for me. It does come down to enforcement. I trust the council would act should this not happen. So also this being debatably in or outside this application, I do think that we are sort of working on something that's already been dealt with, and we don't need this is not something for this committee. So aside from that, I think yeah, I would like to see the biodiversity net gain, and I think that's that's a really important document for me. The maintenance to this site, it seems to be quite a burden, but it all does what it's supposed to do, and it deals with all the issues. Everything's covered, and there's not, when highways don't want to adopt roads and Anglia Water don't want to adopt SUDs, there's not really a lot of choice. But the layout and the style of this, yeah, I think it's an acceptable application. I like the electric charging points for the vehicles. I like the air source heat pumps. I think that's a really important addition to this. I had concerns about the railway line and the proximity of some of the houses to the railway line. The environmental health have looked into that. I know there's a certain standard. I don't know what it is now that we've left the EU, but it used to be a European standard of noise level within a house, and the houses need to pass. I think that's all been dealt with if environmental health have come back and said this is something we can achieve with this site. So I don't really see any more issues with this application, but I'll hear from other councillors.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Stringer next, Councillor Muller, and then Councillor Warboys. I think it was in that order. I apologise if I've got in a muddle. And then back to you, Councillor Matheson. So, Councillor Stringer,
Thank you, Chair.
please.
I'll just be very clear about the policy direction and focus on policy, which is what we're here to do. The District Council has clear policies about encouraging the use of sustainable modes of transport. You're comfortable with the triple lock. I understand that. But the problem that the original committee that approved it spotted was the County Council will only look at the Section 278 from a safety perspective as to whether any impacts would be, quote, severe. That's why that original committee wanted this committee to see the drawing of what goes on under the bridge, to see that what was being triple locked would actually be policy compliant. And that is what you can't see because you can't see the plan. That's the point. You cannot judge whether the width of the footpath proposed will encourage or actually make cycling dangerous. That's the point. And you can't address it because you can't see it. It exists, but we're not allowed to see it. That's why that original committee said it should be here today, and it's not. Which is why I did suggest that if I was voting, I would defer. It already exists. We could see it at another meeting, and we could agree it policy complies with us, rather than allowing a county council to look at it from one perspective only. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, who was next? I've forgotten now. Councillor Muller, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the comments made by colleague Councillor Stringer and also the comments made by Councillor Caston. But I think, you know, we've been informed there is a triple lock, and the particular issue here is not part of the Reserved Matters application. We've been told that right the way through. And there are a lot of good things going with this particular application, as Councillor Caston has already pointed out. One other point I would like to raise, it was mentioned earlier about the possibility of the pumping station being moved slightly, because it was rather close to one of the properties as yet to be built, not on this particular application, but that's a point I would like to raise. But it still comes down to this issue. We have got this triple lock. We know, from what we've been told, that no work can commence until that's actually in place. And if it's not in place, enforcement action could take place, and we would expect that to take place. So that's the way I'm thinking at the moment, Chair, on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Two quite separate things, really. I'd like to say, firstly, I'd like to put forward my suggestion that the development rights over the gardens on the southern border are restricted or prescribed or perhaps even taken away. And perhaps we could consider also, because of the urban nature of the development, that development rights on all the gardens are looked at very carefully, because there is a limited amount of green space. The developer has sort of extended, and there's lots of positive things about it, but it could easily be undermined if everybody was putting in garden offices and whatever in the gardens. You'd soon see that biodiversity diminished. The second thing is, I came this morning and I was thinking quite inside the red box and about the red line about the development, but driving past the development and then being reminded that there's a couple of weeks ago we were talking about the development along Turnkey. Oh no, it's not Turnkey. Turkey House Lane, where there's huge concerns there about the development traffic along that road. That's the main lorry route into Bacton, but we've got two situations here where there are major concerns about access roads. That's both of them, if you like, not just the one. And though I'm not naturally in favour of deferment, I do think of it as kicking the can down the road to some extent. In this case, I find it very difficult to come to a very favourable position unless I actually saw those infrastructure considerations actually resolved. I think there is, I think if we do have the triple lock and if development takes place and then there's got to be enforcement, I think it would save an awful lot of trouble further down the road if we defer this decision until Suffolk County Council actually produced an infrastructure plan that would allay those fears.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Matheson, you were next, I think, weren't you?
Thank you. Yeah, I think Councillor Stringer has put the main point with great clarity. I mean, I am sure that the original committee said concurrent, and in fact, I noted last night a general observation that I wanted to make, that it's not comfortable to sit in committee making decisions with so many things left to afterwards, so to speak, in the conditions, despite the fact that many of the conditions were actually set out in the outline stage. And so I think we are moving towards more frequently saying condition will be concurrent with rather than later stages, which is to be encouraged. Now, I think it's very clear in this case that this is the county council response is on the policy of sustainable transport is yet to come forward to us. Now, when we're usually making a decision, we've got their view, and then we make a decision. Usually we say, yeah, they think it's okay, right, we think it's okay. Occasionally we say, no, we don't agree with you. Now, if we decide now, then we are taking away that option. And what I'm wondering really is, because, I mean, yeah, it's quite a good application until you get to this problem. and you know, I wouldn't have a problem in voting for it. And what I'm wondering is whether we can approve it subject to elected members, that's the point, elected members actually seeing and agreeing that condition, that outline condition. So that's a question for the officers and the legal to answer, whether we can do it in that way, rather than going through it all again in a couple of months' time.
Unfortunately, John, what you're asking is for us to have an informal committee meeting to have a look at the papers that the officers get. So you want to defer the whole thing because you can't do we'll do it with a tacit agreement. It's either we make an agreement or a disagreement. We can't do a tacit. Well, I'm sorry. So you either want to defer it or vote for it or vote against it. So, you know, that's your choice. That'll be your choice.
If that's the decision.
Well, we haven't got there yet. Let's.
Well, if that's the advice on the procedure, then I would propose deferring it.
Well, we haven't finished debating yet, but if you're proposing a deferral, we'll take that forward. Do we have a seconder for deferral? Well, there are other people that want to speak. Do we have a seconder for deferral, please? No, so I'm afraid, John, we'll vote accordingly on how you feel. Councillor Byrne did want to speak, and then Councillor Castle.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have a degree of sympathy with the concerns surrounding the legality, well, not the legality, but the implications of the legal position. I mean, I have to presume, and I believe it's the case, that the approval of the Section 178 would be entirely the responsibility of the County Council. And whilst we should certainly respect the position of our county highways advisors, we do have the right to apply our own judgment to it. That's always been the case within our planning meetings. But in this case, it does seem that our right to apply our judgment to the county position has been removed from us. If that's not the case, I'd like somebody to explain why, because the decision is going to be taken, and if it's a positive decision, regardless of whether we feel it's adequately or sufficiently safe or not, or sufficiently convenient for the users of that route through to the facilities of the village, then we are unable to exercise that judgment in this particular case. Now, if that's wrong, please explain why it's not the case. But I don't think that is a very satisfactory situation, I have to say. But I'll listen to hear what any other members say in response to it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David, Councillor Byrne. But I mean, I think we need the legal and the planning officer to explain to us what we're actually voting on today, although that is a great aspect. And I haven't spoken on the issue yet. So could legal and the planning officer tell us, you're saying we've been denied it? It was never, am I correct in your reading earlier that we weren't denied it, it was delegated, and so can somebody help us there, please, so that David gets the right aspect of what
Can I just explain before we get the answer to that? We would normally have this information in front of us at this time. We would normally be making this decision with that information known. And therefore, we have we would be satisfied that we had all the necessary information, and we could refuse if we wished to refuse, even though the recommendation or the advice from highways that there was it was safe, there was a safe access through underneath the bridge, etc., etc. But we can't do that in this particular case. If we say, okay, we will approve it with the triple lock in place, so okay. But if when we see what the what the answer to the access under the bridge is going to be, we think, oh, had we seen that at the time we made our decision, we probably would have made it differently. That's what I'm saying.
But that decision has already been made with the...
No, the reserve matters. The reserve
reserve matters doesn't include this. That's the point. And please will the officers jump in and help me here, because I listen. I haven't spoken yet and I would like to speak, but I want everybody to get their say first. I always do.
I'm just
but
saying
what
that
we are discussing is
the
this in front of us and the
consequence of a reserve matters decision at this stage, which I'm absolutely aware we are able to take, is not in any way dependent on what we are usually, what is usually available to us in such a critical situation as this one, which is the access to the rest, to the accessibility of the site, pedestrian and cycle, to the rest of the village. I'll listen to what's said, and I may change my view on that.
Well, I can only ask the officer to explain my understanding of what it's been explained to me. I'm not disputing what you're saying, it's just your understanding needs to be...
My response would be, Councillor Byrne, it isn't as uncommon as perhaps you think, because every time, well, in my experience over 42 years, where you are securing highway improvements within the highway, which is what we're doing here, on a major site, whether it's in a Section 106 agreement or within a Grampian condition, such as Condition 12, you don't always have the full detail in front of you. What we had at the time of the outline was an illustrative layout that worked out the principles of how those improvements would be delivered. That was sufficient to put your minds at rest, or your sister committee at rest, that there was a workable solution. The actual mechanics of the engineering drawings is a matter for the Highway Authority, and that's effectively what we're saying to you is this morning you are simply looking at the access into the site, you're looking at the appearance of the properties, you're looking at landscaping, the layout and the scale. We are suggesting that each of those reserved matters is acceptable. You have the security of having the triple lock in place that would mean the development couldn't proceed if we ever got to a position where a Section 278 agreement could not be issued. It's very common to have that arrangement, and I referred earlier to a site in Stowupland where we first developed the triple lock. That is exactly what happened there. We had some illustrative examples of a crossing and all sorts of improvements. The committee was satisfied that that was a matter for the County Council's Highway Authority to resolve, but you had your minds put at rest that if they couldn't be resolved, the triple lock would prevent development, and that's what we have here. It's a common approach. The works are in the highway, that is a matter for the County Council as Highway Authority. But it seems to me, and I know it's a point raised by Councillor Stringer and Councillor Mellon, this is not an issue, I suggest, Chair, for the Planning Committee. This is a matter for officers to pursue with the County Council as to why they cannot get access to those Section 278 drawings. That's not a matter for us. But it might be a matter for those of you who are also county councillors to pursue that with the county council. But as officers, we are satisfied that the scheme, in terms of the reserved matters, is satisfactory. And we're at that point. But there's something else, Chair, through you, that also has crossed my mind. As you've heard this morning, there's a lot of development in Bacton. There will be a lot of sites being built, whether or not you approve this one. We've already got a lot going on. Some of the developers have freely entered into a dialogue with the Parish Council. Some are more reticent. My understanding is that Keepmoat have given commitments to do that. If they haven't, what you might want to do, in considering the reserved matters, is urge Keepmoat to open a new dialogue with the Parish Council so that they can be sharing this information as they move towards, assuming you approve the reserved matters, move towards commencement. If Keepmoat wish to share those drawings with any member of this committee and the Parish Council, there ought to be a mechanism through regular liaison, and you've used that successfully in other villages, but it would need a commitment from James to freely enter into a stronger dialogue with ward members and the parish council as this development proceeds.
Can we just hold on a minute, Councillor Stringer? I mean, we'll come to your views again in a minute. But before Councillor Byrne comes back, I believe the legal officer wants to make comment, or Gemma. So, you know, it's all raising points that we all need to hear. So can we hear them, please?
Perhaps if I start and Christine can join in. So there's a few parts there that I would suggest. Firstly, condition 12 is not something that's actually in front of us today. I appreciate that members were thinking something concurrent with, and that's not the wording of the condition we've got, but it would still come in as a condition, and we would still have to agree that, so there is some mechanism there. However, I'd also suggest there's a degree of caution there. Even if there's something we don't like, that would still be for highways. Highways have still got to agree this through a 278 agreement. They have got to be content that it is workable. There's very difficult manoeuvring there between what planning would like and what is achievable and safe in the highway. So I would suggest that that is the mechanism and would be an appropriate way of dealing with it. And I think that's where we've got to, with officers, is we've got a position that controls it. It's looked at from a point of safety. It would come out of the water in that way. We've also got condition 12 that would come into us for that review. And at this point, that what we need to look at is those strict parts of reserved matters. So I would say that they are separate from what we're looking at today.
I mean, would it help if you read out condition 12? Just is.
Yeah, we
I
can.
don't think that's anywhere in the papers.
I think it's. It is in the papers, but I have to admit I can't remember which page it's on. 140 something, I think.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Bear with me just a second. Thank you. So on page 165, we've got the full wording of condition 12. Just while we sort of flick pages to look at that, I did want to pick up for Councillor Warboys. We've got both the construction management plan condition and a removal of PD rights condition already on the outline. So they are there. But if we revert to condition 12, that's at the bottom of page 165. So the details have got to be submitted to the local planning authority. Obviously, agreement with the highways authority prior to commencement of any works. Details as agreed should be delivered in accordance with a timetable, so we'll have a timetable for that improvement. And no dwelling should be occupied until the improvements have been completed. So that, again, just to run through that. Does that help, Chair?
Now, to Councillor Byrne, you wanted to come back, and you may have some other issues, so please continue.
No other issues, just on that particular one. So I'm just reading on 165. The only opportunity, if you like, of influencing the outcome of County Highways deliberations on this will be the local planning authority in consultation with the local highway authority prior to commencement of any works. And so, yes, indeed, that would presumably be an officer connection rather than a member connection. So there's no member opportunity for influencing this at all.
I might just query that with committee services, if we just take just a second quickly. We're just considering whether there was an opportunity to bring the discharge of condition in front of committee. I don't think we've got any prior experience of that between us to do so. So it's not something I could say here in this room here and now we could definitely do, but certainly we could take that away and look at whether there was an opportunity to do that if that's what members were minded to. And certainly I'm sure Vince, as the officer, is sat in the room here, he's hearing this and he would speak with the ward councillor at the time. So I appreciate that doesn't necessarily give you certainty, but there are two options there, one of which is a certainty that we could do in terms of that discussion with the ward councillor at the very least. And if members were minded on the committee option, I can certainly explore that.
So, could we put it as a condition that... No, I can see from the legal... I'm just trying to... I mean, unfortunately, that is not what we are... I keep coming back to what we are discussing. And I haven't spoken yet, and I will speak when everybody's finished speaking. So, no, we couldn't put a condition on it. Okay, right. Councillor, does any of our advisors wish to make any further comment before I come back to Councillor Byrne to let him finish his comments? No? No. Councillor Byrne, if you'd like to continue, please. Thank you.
Say that what Gemma has just told us is to a small degree reassuring. But if that is a possibility, I'd rather see it confirmed in advance of making the decision than confirmed after the event that it wasn't possible. And so on that basis, a deferral would seem to be, I hate to say this because I don't like deferrals as such. They need, you know, we shouldn't be doing that. But if unless it's avoidable, unavoidable. In this case, it probably is avoidable. But I don't feel as comfortable as I might be. That's all. Thank you.
Vince just wanted to pass another comment.
It seems to me that we might not need a deferral, subject to Gemma confirming, but all discharge of condition applications are made to the local planning authority, and virtually all of them are dealt with by officers. But if it is the will of this committee that when it comes to condition 12, you make an exception, and we are required to bring it to you, despite the scheme of delegation, that would seem to be the way forward.
Now I'm confused. So are we going to vote on what we've got before us?
I would argue that you're perfectly able to vote on the reserved matters, but what we are saying is, in doing so, you will instruct officers to bring the condition 12 discharge
and only
condition 12 to committee as and when those details are formally submitted.
And I have just had confirmation from Chief Planning Officer that that is something we have done in the past, so we could therefore do it.
That sounds comfortable, right? So, David, you've had a more comforting comfort now, haven't you? You're more comfortable with that now, right? So, does anyone else? Councillor Custon, yes, and then Councillor Matheson, then I'll have a go.
Yeah, I would like to avoid deferral on this. I don't think that that's what this committee's meant to do, and also I don't feel like this is something we can ever do anything about, so deferring is not really an option for me. I do think it's sensible for this to come back as a very small condition that we can look at and we can see that it works, and we are getting what we expect. I do have faith in highways to deliver something, and safety would be my, if that's what they use to make the decision, that would be my first thought. It's got to be safe, and it's and if it's delivered, it's the end of the problem for me. I do remember in Somersham 42 houses and planning A saying that we want a footpath, an accessible footpath in the section 106, and that never happened. So it does concern me. It is really important to make sure these things happen. So I think I don't want to defer, but if there is a condition, if we can do this and bring back just this matter to this meeting, if that's what this reserve matters is for, if that works, I think that would be good, and that would reassure a lot of people on this committee and deal with a blockage that we seem to be in at the moment.
Right, okay, well, so is that a proposal, or is that, you know, with that in place?
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear exactly what that would look like in there, and I'd like to maybe, if I'm proposing, I'd like to add some conditions of my own and just see how the committee feels about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been aware of various points in the debate, so if I pick some of those up that I think have been mentioned. So at the moment I'm looking at an approval as the recommendation on page 121, that we delegate to the Chief Planning Officer to confirm biodiversity net gain under condition 10 prior to discharge, and to review the location of the substation, with condition 12 to return to the Development Control Committee. So that's not a condition, it's a note on our action sheet, and I would take that away, report that back to Chief Planning Officer, and we'd set something up on the original reference to our system that would essentially...
And would it come back to Planning B or
I
Planning A?
can put DCB if you have a particular
I think
preference
it's appropriate
for
that we've had a good airing, that we all understand what's going on.
Yeah, I've added the B to the end so we can make sure that that's Development Control B specifically, absolutely.
Thank you. Right, so with that in mind...
Yeah, and the other two conditions that I've got written down here have just been said, the biodiversity and an assessment of whether it's acceptable for that pumping station to be where it is with the new planning application being considered. And also, where possible, I'd like to see permeable driveways and surfaces. I haven't seen that in here, but I'd like
Correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't all surfaces be permeable for...
Well, the good news is we can pick that up under a separate condition that isn't part of the reserved matters, so we can deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy, thank you.
Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to second Councillor Caston's approval with the conditions that he's actually just discussed. Thank you.
Councillor Warboys, you had your hand up and I haven't spoken yet, so if you would like to put your points across and speak to the motion, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just clarifying in my own mind that if this is planning application is approved with the conditional the discharge of condition 12 is accepted, at what point will building commence? Will building commence as soon as this is approved, or the discharge of...
No, the Grampian condition says they cannot commence until this problem, section 278, is approved and agreed. So they can't start until that happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say that I'm very pleased that officers have now come forward with a way of not revisiting the whole job. Thank you very much.
Right. Councillor Byrne, did you want to come back? I don't know whether your hand was up or not. Right, okay. So while you're writing everything down and giving it all clear, I too have been listening to this for many years. And I too know the area that's concerned. I'm only going to briefly comment on that footpath and the issue with Suffolk County Council. I'm pleased that we may have found a route through to assist everybody, to let them understand that it's not something that we're flippantly dismissing, we're not. So I absolutely understand where Councillor Stringer and Councillor Mallon, who live in the area and are the ward member, are coming from. So I'll move on to what we have before us. And I think I tend to disagree with the Parish Council on the layout of it. It suits somebody and it suits others not. But I think with the design of the properties that we've got coming forward, I think they're rather interesting. And I liked the brick wall, I liked the bay windows, and I liked a lot of the general layout of everything. There's no triple parking, and I think Vince summed it up at the beginning that it's 100% NDDS, it's Part 4 M42 of the building regs, 100% air source heat pumps, and I heard Councillor Byrne's query about the noise of them, and I must admit, I too worry about them, but it's the way forward, it's where we're going. And the electric vehicle charging points. And I think you mentioned, Vince, that this could be used as a benchmark. And I think it is refreshing to have a new applicant in our area prepared to engage with our community. And I can see Councillor Stringer frowning. Well, I've never come across the thing. But I was a bit concerned about Councillor Stringer's comment, and Councillor Stringer, I quoted you verbatim, and it did worry me a little bit, where you said you didn't trust Suffolk County Council, and I find that rather alarming that you should say that in full council, because we have to trust what's coming forward, but we now have the opportunity to see whether your trust is with them, and being a county councillor, I'm sure you will make sure they are with us. So I hope very much that the matters are all resolved. So I have a proposal and a seconder. I think, do we need the conditions read out again, or are we happy with what we've gone over? Right, so may we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy, Gemma, do you just want to read the conditions out just so we're 100% sure on what we're voting
I would prefer
for?
to, if that's right, and I appreciate it's a bit extra time.
No,
Thank you,
no,
Chair.
no.
Yeah, so we're looking at approving as the recommendation on page 121, and then we're going to delegate to the Chief Planning Officer to confirm biodiversity net gain under condition 10 prior to discharge, and to review the location of the pumping station position. And then, not as a condition, but as an informative to myself, to the Chief Planning Officer, that condition 12 will return to Development Control Committee B, essentially as an exception, not something that we would normally do, but to allow that resolution in this case. That would be my proposal at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now open in modern.gov. Councillor Caston, is your app not working?
No, I can't seem to vote. Could I vote verbally?
Of course. What
Thank you. I'm for my own proposal.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for, so that is unanimous. None received, Chair.